Glen Weber is here. He's running for state's attorney on the Republican primary on March 20th. Glenn, good morning.
Good morning, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here. We'll tell people in this half hour what you can do for the state's attorney office that's not being done now. And first of all, I always ask candidates this basic question: what makes you want to run for an office in the first place? I know you've had experience, but in another area. But what about this particular community and in this particular county? What do you bring to the table that's different from what's there now?
What I bring to the table that's different from my primary opponent and also from the present state's attorney's extensive experience prosecuting major violent crime. And I've been saying this many times, and I'll continue to say it all the way through, that violent crime is destroying this community. The violent criminals are taking over Rockford. They are not being hammered as we did from 1987 to 1990, and I was a violent crimes prosecutor, sending away the major violent criminals to prison and going toe-to-toe in the courtroom in tough jury trials, taking them on, and that's what needs to be done. It's not being done by the current state's attorney. My primary opponent is incapable of doing it, has never done it.
A lot of state's attorneys in the history of this county and this state, when they get in office, they don't actually go to many trials. You're saying you would physically be there at more of these trials?
Yes. What I'm saying is I would try serious violent crimes and on a regular basis.
How do you feel that a state's attorney, and obviously you're doing the prosecuting, but you still have to have the cooperation of the law enforcement agencies. Do you see in your travels and your knowledge of this community that we have a better situation today than a few years ago with cooperation of the Rockford Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, the state police, the little agencies around the area in Roscoe and Rockton, etc., all these Winnebago County agencies, are they cooperating for the benefit of all of us?
Yes. The police officers can only do what they're led to do from terms of a prosecution standpoint. I mean, my experience with the police has been one of outstanding cooperation because we work with them at all times. That's not being done by the state's attorney's office as much as it was in the past, and so that's not a fault of the law enforcement. That's a fault of the state's attorney's office. And I don't mean getting involved in programs, so to speak. What I mean is the day-to-day business of prosecuting cases, getting those calls in the middle of the night, getting those calls 24/7, working with the police. I found in doing that for 15 years here in Winnebago County and 4 years as Joe Davis County State's Attorney, 2 years in Boone County, I found that the police officers here in this area, really in all of Northwest Illinois, are outstanding officers, and they will do what you want them to do on the cases when you have that cooperation with them, as I have for 21 years as a prosecutor.
A lot of the cops that I talked to at a personal level over the years I've been in Rockford radio, generally, no matter who's in charge, they seem to think that many times we arrest these prostitutes, or we arrest these burglars, we arrest these perpetrators of various crimes, and they're back on the street and they get out bonded cheaply. How do you answer that?
Well, my tack with the police officers would be as it was in the past. We cooperated with them and kept them informed and got them involved in the trial process, and also got them involved in the plea process. That's something that's not, another thing that's not done. Certainly hasn't been done historically by either my primary opponent or the present state's attorney, and that's something I did for 21 years. Is not only going through the case with the police officer and explaining to them, okay, this is how we're going to charge this, this is what we need to do, this is the follow-up we need, but also when you get into court, you explain to them prior to doing a plea agreement why you have to do a plea agreement in certain cases. That's why I have that relationship with the police officers, because they understand the realities of prosecuting cases, because you're always communicating with them and keep them informed and keep them satisfied with your dispositions of cases, either when you try the case or when you do a negotiation of a case.
Glen Weber is here. If you have a question for Glen, he's running in the Republican primary on March 20th for state's attorney of Winnebago County. Glen Weber is here. If you have a question for Glen about crime and punishment and his aspirations to be your state's attorney, feel free to give us a call at 874-TALK, 874-8255. The lines are open at 6:40 in the morning. How do you feel personally about Illinois? It probably never happened, but Illinois adopting an open primary.
You mean an open primary in the respect of you can pick a Republican or a Democrat?
Right.
In some respects, Illinois already has an open primary in that there's no registered Republicans or Democrats. So you do have...
You can change if you want.
You can change if you want.
But you can't vote both sides.
But you can't go in and say, okay...
One pick here, pick there, like a la carte.
Yeah, for the county board, I'm going to pick my Democratic friend. For state's attorney, I'm going to pick my Republican friend. I think...
Well, the reason I bring that up, there are many people that call this station and say the reason I don't vote is because it's not an open primary. That's the excuse, maybe, I don't know. But in a primary, even with the presidential election coming up, we're expecting, if we're real lucky, 40% of the people about that vote that are registered.
Right, and that's just the nature of the beast in a primary election. Unfortunately, we just don't get the turnout that we do in the general election. Of course, some years in the general election, we don't get much of a turnout either, right, depending on what's going on.
Guy has a question for you. Guy, good morning. You're talking to candidate Glen Weber.
Good morning, Mr. Weber. I listened with interest the fact that you said you were a prosecutor for many years with Winnebago County, and then I believe you said you went to Joe Davis County as state's attorney, and then you mentioned working in Boone County, and I presume at the present time that you've been in private practice. Why have you moved around so much and done different things? Apparently you're not prosecuting right now. Why did you leave Joe Davis County if you had gone there as a state's attorney to come back to run in Winnebago County?
Yeah, I didn't leave Joe Davis County to run back in Winnebago County. What happened was in about 1996, I'll try and make a long story short. I appreciate your question, and certainly to answer it as best I can. In 1996, I started to get involved in Joe Davis County. There was a sheriff out there who was not satisfied with the state's attorney, and I was involved in a homicide case here where eventually it led to me talking to the sheriff up there, and he was very interested in me running. So I love the area. I don't know if you've ever been up there. Galena is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful area. I had traveled there numerous times over the years. I thought, what a beautiful area, what a wonderful opportunity to be state's attorney there. So I did. I ran. I did not have any friends or relatives out there. I just ran on my record of prosecuting cases aggressively, and the job I'd done as Winnebago County assistant state's attorney. So I was elected. I ran again in the primary in 2004. And I lost the primary. And it's interesting because Mr. McDuff brings up the open primary situation. I got more votes in that Republican primary than any individual running for state's attorney in the history of Joe Davis County. But I lost because what happened was Democrats crossed over and voted in the Republican primary. So I didn't finish answering your question, but from a personal note, if we had registered Republicans and registered Democrats, I believe I would have won that election. So I kind of take the tack of, we either should have an open or a closed one, but we have kind of an in-between one where you can be in a situation where you're a Republican who's done an outstanding job, as I was in Joe Davis County, yet you have all these mean-spirited Democrats who really want a Democrat to be who's in Republican clothing, which was the person I ran against. He runs in the Republican primary, really a Democrat, and beats me. So I lost that election in 2004. I went back to my friend Paul Logley, and he said, "You know what, Glenn? I would love to have you back." And I said, "Thank you, Paul. That's great. I appreciate it." And so I came back to Winnebago County.
You live in Rockford now, right?
I do.
Yeah. By the way, if you have a quick call for Glenn, he's running for state's attorney in the Republican primary on March 20th. And, of course, he's a proven prosecutor, and he is running in this very important primary March 20th. And he's got one competitor on the Republican side, and, of course, he hopes to be the guy running against the incumbent Democrat come November of this year. We're talking about violent crime and how he can fight that. If you have a quick question where Mr. Glen Weber stands on this problem of crime in our community, feel free to call us quick, like at 874-TALK, 874-8255. What about the jail? I don't know today's count. Let's say it's 1,100. What can we do to move people through this jail a lot quicker? Have you ever thought about a night court or a 24-hour-a-day shift until the numbers come down? A lot of people sitting there for petty offenses. This is just a holding tank. It's not really a prison. What about the overcrowding, if there is such? I don't know if it's overcrowded right now, but it has a potential of 1,300 beds taken. But it seems it's almost at capacity now. What can we do to move things through the system faster?
We have more trial lawyers, have more trials, and get the cases moving and tried within a short period of time, within a year, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the case. But the problem is, of course, now people are sitting in jail for 3, 4, and 5 years awaiting trial, and that's not acceptable, and that's the reason, one of the major reasons for the overcrowding situation is the delay in cases. The jail is not a place for these violent felons who should be out going to prison. I mean, it is temporarily, but it's not a place for them to be for 5 years.
Right.
It's a place for them to be for a year while they're waiting trial, because prison is the place for them, and that's where they need to be, and that's what we need to do.
Glen Weber is